Help to Buy achieved? The first phase of it began more than a year ago, and the idea behind it was to help people buy homes who couldn't otherwise afford a mortgage. The second phase, more controversial, began last February, and that also helps people who can't afford the deposit. The big question is whether it's really helped people who need to be helped or simply stoked the housing boom. Well, today we'll get the first official figures on how it has been working, the effect that it's having, and I'm joined by John Stewart, who's the Director of Economic Affairs at the Home Builders Federation, and by Bridget Rosewell, economist and senior partner at the consulting group Volterra. What do you think, the number crunching that you've done yourself, Ms. Rosewell?
I think that this is a sticking plaster, Help to Buy. It does help some of the individuals who get that support, but in fact the numbers concerned, even if we have much bigger numbers, I don't think is going to make a massive difference to what is a much bigger issue around the housing market. So it may change a little local market in some places, but the real problem in housing is actually how many we're building that people want to live in.
Right, and is that your experience as well, Mr. Stewart?
To an extent, I agree with Bridget that it's relatively small in the context of the whole housing market, but the effect on new housing supply has been quite dramatic. And as she rightly says, that's the fundamental problem we have. We just don't build enough homes in this country. And if you look at the government's figures for house building, in the first 12 months of what's called the equity loan scheme of Help to Buy, new home starts in the private sector are up by a third, and in the first quarter they are up by 44%. So it's having quite a dramatic effect on new build.
And how do you know that it is cause and effect?
Well, you don't for sure. No, I absolutely appreciate that. And I think that you couldn't attribute all of that increase to Help to Buy. There's clearly been some improvement in the mortgage market, the availability of mortgages more generally, and in the housing market as a whole, consumer confidence is returning, the economy is beginning to recover. So some of that. But I would guess that quite a significant proportion of that increase could be attributed to Help to Buy.
In which case, Bridget Rosewell, that's important.
Indeed, if that is the case, I would challenge that. I don't think that's been the major feature. What's been much more of a major feature is confidence coming back to house builders that they can unlock the sites that they've been sitting on for a number of years.
But they've got to have
they themselves have lacked finance, in fact. And as the banks have generally loosened up their own criteria for lending, that not just to the consumer, the purchaser of the house, but also to the builder of the house, that has unlocked a whole level of demand, and this must have made some difference, but I doubt it's been the major feature in getting house builders to start building again.
I'm never quite sure, Mr. Stewart, you can help me with this, whether builders build houses, to what extent they build houses on spec.
They do. I mean, it's called speculative house building. But, of course, you have to take a judgment as to whether you think you're going to have customers. Clearly, you don't start properties, you don't start building foundations if you have no expectation that they will be able to be sold. So the expression that's often used is it's sales-led. If you're confident that there are going to be more buyers, which is what happened as soon as Help to Buy was announced, then you'll be prepared to start more homes. And I'm sorry, I disagree with Bridget. The main problem recently, or in the last couple of years, has certainly not been finance for the larger house builders. It has remained a problem for the smaller house builders, but it's been an issue of customers. And if you've got more customers, you can build more, and that's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, obviously, the more customers but it is a question of how many customers you think you're going to have. So it is all about perception. It may well be that the existence of the scheme just sort of tip the edge as far as individual house builders getting started. So that could be crucial. But I don't think that's not going to keep the whole thing going. We still need to continue to build more houses, and we have to get over the whole sort of planning loop of how long all of this takes.
Indeed.
And indeed the difficulty of financing very large house building programmes, because, as John said, if you're waiting for the buyers to come along, there's never going to be lots of buyers. So that remains the really big problem. You'll dribble them out to keep your market going. You don't want to have 1,000 houses sitting there waiting to be sold. That's the big issue.
And what about the other big issue, at least a lot of people thought it would be, maybe they've been proved wrong, which is that it would stoke a housing boom?
I don't think that's been happening. I don't think there's any evidence that that's the case. If you take London, where house prices have gone up pretty dramatically, the other Help to Buy scheme, not the one that's applying to new homes, but the mortgage guarantee scheme, we're talking about the figures that we have so far, a few hundred transactions, which is, a drop in the ocean in the context of the London housing market. And if you look at the government's figures for house price inflation, outside London and the South East, prices in the last 12 months went up under 5%. Now, that isn't a bubble and it isn't a boom. It's just the beginnings of a recovery. So I think the notion that Help to Buy, the mortgage guarantee scheme as stoking a bubble or a boom is just completely nonsensical.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That's what's going on in London is all a matter of supply. People want to move to London, they want to come and live here, and there aren't any houses, so the prices go up. More people renting, and it's a very different market.
The prices have gone up staggeringly.
They have gone up staggeringly. Well, they've gone up staggeringly over the last 20 years or so, not just very recently, but you think back to sort of prices 20 years ago and where they are now, it's just extraordinary. But if you also think about how little we have built compared to all of the calculations of how many we need, that's the problem.
Yeah, now
this is sticking plaster.
But when you say how little we have built, there is an awful lot of property, isn't there, that is not, and you know about this, obviously, Mr. Stewart, that is not being used for one reason or another. There are a lot of brownfield sites that aren't being exploited, and so on.
There are brownfield sites, and house builders build most of their homes. Something like 80% of the homes that are built these days are on brownfield sites. But unfortunately, a lot of the brownfield land that is around, it reflects our industrial heritage in this country, is not in the right locations. House builders can only build homes in locations where there is a market.
And people want to live, yeah.
Yes, where people want to live and they're prepared to borrow money and buy a home. So there is a mismatch. And Bridget made a comment earlier. She's absolutely right. The planning issue is being sorted and has to be sorted. But I think the key thing is we've got to do this step by step. There is an acute shortage of housing. There has been over 25 years. We're not going to solve it overnight, but this is a really good start. But it is only a start. Everybody accepts that.
Thank you both very much. John Stewart and Bridget Rosewell.
The time is now 19 minutes to 8. Let's have a look at today's papers, and the problems facing the Liberal Democrats get widespread coverage. The Mail says the departure of Lord Oakeshott came on one of the most poisonous days in modern politics. It describes his resignation statement as the most vicious and menacing since Geoffrey Howe attacked Mrs Thatcher in the Commons.